My childhood was shaped by tragedy before I was old enough to understand it. A car crash stole my father and left my mother permanently broken, not just in body, but somewhere deeper. We kept living in the house my dad left us, and for a long time, it was just the two of us holding the walls up together. When my mom eventually started dating again, she was gone more than she was home. That's when my Uncle Steve stepped in, not as a replacement for my dad, but as something close enough to matter. He'd throw a football with me in the backyard until it got dark. He remembered which movies I wanted to see. He took care of our pets like they were his own. For a kid growing up without a father, those things don't feel small. They feel like everything. But somewhere around the time I turned 16, he just stopped coming around. No explanation. No goodbye. My mom would go tight-lipped whenever I brought him up, and after a while, I stopped asking. I convinced myself he drifted away, the way people sometimes do. I didn't want to consider the alternative. By 18, the house was essentially mine. My mom had moved in with her new husband, visiting only occasionally. And as much as I told myself I loved the freedom, the late nights, the friends, the noise I could make at any hour, the truth was that a big, empty house gets heavy when you're alone in it. The only constant was Jojo, my 13-year-old Australian shepherd. Old and slow and grey around the muzzle, but always there, always pressed against my side in bed like he knew I needed him. One night in January, I remember because the Christmas tree was still up, lights still blinking in the corner of the living room, I woke up and the bed was cold beside me. Jojo was gone. I wasn't immediately worried. He was old. He had to go out sometimes. I called his name into the dark and shuffled downstairs, expecting to find him pawing at the back door. Instead, I found him standing completely still at the top of the basement stairs, not scratching to go out. Not whining. Just standing there, staring straight down into the dark below, rigid as a statue. The kind of stillness that doesn't belong on a living animal. I crouched beside him. "What is it, boy?" His tail ticked once, a single, mechanical wag, and then went stiff again. His eyes didn't move from the bottom of those stairs that I flicked on the basement light. The familiar yellow glow spilled down the steps and revealed nothing. Just concrete walls, old furniture, the water heater in the corner. I stood there for a long moment, listening. Nothing. Not even the house settling. I grabbed Jojo by the collar, pulled him away, shut the basement door, and brought him upstairs. I told myself it was an animal. A mouse. Maybe a raccoon that had gotten into the crawlspace somehow. Dogs hear things we can't. There was a perfectly reasonable explanation. I got back into bed. I did not sleep. Every few minutes, Jojo would lift his head and stare at the bedroom doorway, ears forward, body tense, like something was moving through the house below us. Each time he did it, the air in the room felt a little colder, a little thinner. Eventually, I made a decision I probably shouldn't have. I was 18 years old and I refused to be the kind of person who hid under the covers. I got up, walked downstairs, and stood in front of the basement door again. Jojo had followed me. Of course he had. And he went right back to his position, nose nearly touching the door, staring at the crack beneath it like he could see something on the other side. My hand found the doorknob. I pulled it open. The darkness at the bottom of the stairs looked different at night, deeper than it should have been, like it was pushing back against the light. I reached inside and flicked the switch. Then I called down. "Is someone there?" Silence. I started down. The stairs were old and they screamed under every step, announcing exactly where I was, exactly how close I was getting. The ceiling was low enough that you couldn't see the full basement until you were almost halfway down. Each step revealed a little more of that concrete floor, those bare walls. Then I heard my name. It came from somewhere below me, from the direction of the laundry room in the far corner. A voice I hadn't heard in years, but recognized instantly, the way you recognize something that belongs to the architecture of your childhood. It was my Uncle Steve's voice. Weak and thin, like a man speaking through pain, but unmistakably his. I flew down the remaining steps. Uncle Steve. The basement was empty. I checked behind the couch. I checked behind the TV stand. I walked the perimeter of that concrete room with my heart slamming against my ribs, looking into every shadow. There was only one place left, the laundry room door, closed in the far corner. And standing there, staring at it, I heard the faintest possible sound from the other side. The smallest suggestion of movement, something inside me collapsed. Every rational thought dissolved. I turned and ran up those stairs so fast I lost a slipper, and I didn't stop until I was on the other side of the basement door, pressing my whole body weight against it. Jojo was barking, real barks, desperate and loud, the first time I'd heard him bark in months that I locked my bedroom door. I called my mother over and over until she picked up, whispering into the phone that someone was in the basement, that it sounded exactly like Uncle Steve, that Jojo had heard it too and I wasn't losing my mind. She listened until I finished. Then she told me, very gently, that I had probably woken from a nightmare that I pushed back. I told her Jojo had been at that door before I was even awake. I asked her if she thought I'd lie about something like this. And that's when she paused. That pause lasted a long time. When she finally spoke again, she told me that Uncle Steve had gotten sick with cancer. That he'd been sick for years. That he had died, quietly, without telling me, because she couldn't bring herself to hand me another loss. She'd let him simply fade from my life rather than tell me the truth. She was still explaining when I stopped her. "Mom," I said. "He's in the basement right now." She told me to call the police. So I did. 2 officers arrived, checked the entire house top to bottom, and found nothing. The laundry room looked exactly as it always had. No signs of entry. No signs of anyone. They were polite about it. They were clearly humoring me that I called my mother back after they left. She finished her explanation. She'd hidden his death to protect me. She couldn't bear to see me grieve again. She thought it was kinder. I told her it was the opposite of kind. But even as I was angry with her, something else was sitting in the room with me. Something harder to name. She said she believed me when I described what I'd heard. I could feel it through the phone, the careful way she didn't dismiss it, the way her voice got quieter. And that terrified me more than anything that had happened in that basement. Because if she believed it too, then there was no comfortable explanation left. That I sat on my bedroom floor with Jojo pressed against me, his gray muzzle resting on my knee, both of us listening to a house that was finally, completely silent. And why Mother sold the house the following year. The apartment was a good deal, and I knew it. Second floor of an old house, basically converted into its own living space, bedroom, bathroom, small kitchen, a living room with windows that let in decent light. Cheap rent. Landlord out of state and largely unreachable. The only catch, the thing I tried not to think about at night, was the first floor. It was empty. Had been for months while the landlord supposedly renovated it. Dark and hollow below me every single night, an entire floor of abandoned rooms with no furniture, no lights, no sound, just old hardwood floors and whatever lived in the walls of a house that age. I told myself I was being dramatic. I moved in. For a few weeks, nothing happened. Then one night around 1 in the morning, lying in bed scrolling through my phone, I heard a footstep. Just one. Directly below me, heavy enough to feel more than here, a deliberate weight pressing down on old floorboards. I stopped breathing. A few seconds passed. Then another step. Slow, measured, moving through what I knew was the downstairs living room. I sat up in the dark and just listened, waiting for it to stop, waiting for the house to creak the way houses do and give me a reasonable excuse to lie back down. It didn't sound like a house settling. It sounded like a person trying to be quiet. Eventually, the sound stopped. I didn't sleep well, but I convinced myself by morning that I'd imagined it. I checked the first floor on my way out the next day, locked, dusty, empty. An old broken table in one room. Nothing else. I felt almost embarrassed. The night after that, it happened again. It became a pattern. Late at night, 2 or 3 times a week, the footsteps would start up below me. Sometimes just a few slow steps, then silence. Once, a cabinet door shut, a soft, deliberate click that I felt in my chest. I texted my friend about it, and he joked that my downstairs neighbor had finally moved in. I didn't find it funny. I called the landlord. He sounded more annoyed than concerned, told me old houses make noise, and suggested I call the police if I was nervous. The indifference was somehow worse than if he'd been alarmed. It meant I was on my own. One night I came home late and stopped the moment I stepped through my door. Nothing looked different. The lights were off the way I'd left them. But something felt wrong in a way I couldn't explain, a shift in the air, the sense that the space I was standing in had recently been occupied by something other than me. Then a thud came from directly below. Something hitting a wall, or furniture moving. I stepped backward until I hit the door frame. More footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. I left. Sat in my car with the doors locked and called the police. They came, searched the first floor thoroughly, and found nothing. No sign of forced entry. No one inside. One of the officers was kind about it. He said old buildings do strange things acoustically. I nodded and thanked him and didn't believe a word of it. Over the days that followed, small details accumulated. The first floor door, which I had definitely closed after the police left, was ajar by an inch when I got home from work. A faint smell of cigarette smoke near one of the downstairs windows, though none of my neighbors smoked, at least not outside that window. And then the worst one, the footsteps stopping directly beneath my bedroom, followed by a long silence, followed by 3 light taps on the ceiling below me. Once. Twice. Then silence. Then 3 more. I didn't wait to hear a third time. I texted a friend and left within minutes, taking nothing with me. The next day, we went back together in daylight. Everything looked fine until my friend crouched near one of the downstairs kitchen cabinets and pulled out a cigarette, but from where it had been stuffed back against the toe kick, barely visible. It looked fresh. Someone had been in that apartment. Not just passing through, staying. Settling in. Making themselves comfortable in an empty floor of a house while the person sleeping above them had no idea. The landlord finally took it seriously after that. He drove out and discovered that one of the back windows didn't latch properly. It looked closed, but could be pried open from outside if you knew where to push. He thought maybe someone local had figured that out and was using the first floor as a place to sleep. He said he'd fix the window. I said I was done. I went back one last time to grab clothes and my laptop. I was moving fast, stuffing things into a bag, when a sound drifted up from the first floor hallway below me. It wasn't a footstep. It wasn't a thud. It was a cough. Human. Unmistakable. Close. I grabbed the bag and ran. Called the police from my car for the second time. This time, they found something, fresh marks on the windowsill, dirt disturbed in a way that suggested someone had been climbing in and out regularly. And in a downstairs closet, an old blanket I had never seen before. Someone had been living there. Below me. 4 weeks. Listening through the floors while I went about my life directly above, never knowing, never suspecting, sleeping 6 inches of wood and insulation away from a stranger in the dark. I moved out that weekend. Even now, any unexpected sound at night lands differently than it used to. It doesn't take much to remind me what it felt like to realize the empty room beneath you isn't empty at all. My name is Chris. I was 22 when this happened, and I still think about it more than I'd like to admit. My older brother Tom and I were living in a mother-daughter house our parents owned. Tom had the downstairs unit with his own entrance. I had the whole upstairs, open living area, small kitchen, a hallway leading back to the bathroom and my bedroom at the end. We had an interior door connecting the 2 floors, which mostly just sat open. The arrangement worked well. We had our own space but were never more than a staircase away from each other. Then Tom went to Mexico with his fiancée for a week, and for the first time, the whole building was mine. The night it happened started exactly the way unremarkable evenings do. Home by 7, dinner on the stove, chicken and rice, nothing complicated, TV playing in the background, the ordinary rhythm of a quiet night. After I cleaned up and put everything away, I settled on the couch and felt my eyes start to get heavy. Around that time, I thought I heard something from downstairs. A thud, low and dull, like something toppling over or a door catching its frame. I muted the TV and sat still. Nothing followed. The kind of sound a house makes when no one is inside it, I told myself, the natural protest of old wood and old bones. Still, I went down and checked every room. Tom's living room, kitchen, bedroom, bathroom. Nothing out of place. Everything exactly as he'd left it. I went back upstairs, finished my night, and went to bed. I was almost asleep when the music started. It was loud, loud enough to jolt me upright out of a half-dream, heart already going before I'd fully processed what I was hearing. A slow, dark instrumental piece filling the apartment, coming from the Alexa on my kitchen counter. A song I didn't recognize and had never heard before, with a low, haunting tone that felt wrong for the middle of the night. Alexa, stop. Nothing happened. I said it again, louder. No response. I got up, walked into the hallway, and said it a third time at full volume. The music cut off immediately. I stood there looking at the device for a moment, then chalked it up to a glitch. Went back to bed. A few minutes later, almost asleep again, the Alexa spoke. Sorry, I didn't quite get that. I'm having trouble understanding. No prompt. No one had spoken to it. It was responding to something I couldn't hear. I got up again, unplugged it from the wall, carried the cord a foot away from the outlet, and went back to bed. Whatever was wrong with it, that was finished. I fell asleep faster than I expected. I don't know how long I was out before the music started again. This time it came blasting into my sleep from a dead stop, and I was already on my feet before I was fully conscious. I stood in the dark hallway and my mind went immediately to one fact: I unplugged that thing. I walked toward the kitchen with my legs going slightly numb. The Alexa was plugged back into the wall. Lit up. Playing music. I stood there and stared at it. I ran through every possible explanation: sleepwalking, confusion, some kind of lapse in memory, and none of them held. I had pulled that cord out myself. I remembered the specific resistance of it, the small pop when it disconnected. There was nothing uncertain about that memory. I went back to my room and locked the door. Pulled a chair in front of it and sat with my ear close to the wood, listening to the apartment on the other side. For a long time, there was nothing. Just the kind of silence that gets louder the longer you sit in it. Then, from somewhere in the living room, quiet but distinct, a whisper. Alexa, play, and then something I couldn't make out. The device responded. Music flooded the apartment. I don't think I've ever felt fear like that, the kind that doesn't arrive gradually but drops all at once, like the floor giving way. Someone was in my apartment. Standing in my living room, 6 feet from where I'd been sleeping, plugging in a device I had disconnected and whispering commands to it in the dark. I called 911. And I don't know exactly why: panic, probably, the desperate need to make noise and break whatever spell had settled over the apartment, but I also started yelling. Telling whoever was out there that I was on the phone with police, that they needed to leave, that I wasn't going to be quiet about this. The music was still going, drowning out any response, and I had no way of knowing if the person was still there or already gone. The operator stayed on with me. When the song ended, I yelled at the Alexa to stop, and it did. The officer arrived within minutes. He cleared the whole building, upstairs and downstairs both, and found no one. But as he was leaving, he mentioned something almost as an aside: my front door had been wide open when he arrived. I had locked that door. I was certain of it. Which meant whoever had been in my apartment hadn't come through a window or a vent. They had walked out the front door. They had been close enough to me, close enough to this locked door where I sat with a chair wedged against it, to walk past it on their way out. The next night, I stayed elsewhere. When Tom got back 2 days later, I told him everything. He went through both floors and found nothing missing, nothing disturbed. He only believed me because of the police record. Otherwise, he'd have thought I was trying to frighten him. We installed cameras immediately, front, back, and both interior doors. Nothing like it ever happened again. Eventually our parents asked us to move out so they could rent the place. I won't pretend I was entirely sorry to go. But I think about it still. The empty downstairs unit while Tom was away. The thud I heard the first evening that I brushed off as nothing. How long someone might have been down there before that night, in the dark and quiet, learning the rhythms of the house. Learning my schedule. Waiting for the right moment to come upstairs and see exactly what would happen. That part bothers me more than anything else. Not the fear of that night, but the patience of it.